Right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody on the call. This is Db2 session 2.0 and the Db2 session just before lunch. We've got Bob Bassano from Rocket to take us through getting more value from Db2, no matter the version or function level. So at the end, please do provide feedback to the links that we'll send out. And if you've got any questions, put them in the chat. And without further ado, hand over to Bob. Take it away, Bob.
All right, thank you. So for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Bob Barsano. I am a principal solutions advisor with Rocket Software. I've been with Rocket for 18 years. I started working with Db2 back in 1991. I think it was, if my memory serves me correct, it was version 2.3. So, and as well working with the mainframe too. So, but today, my session is getting more value from Db2, no matter the version or function level. Let me advance the slide to the agenda. So, the purpose of the presentation today is, I feel like when a new release of Db2 comes out or a new function level comes out, it gets a lot of attention at that point. There's a lot of WebExes and, it's, presented many times at conferences. And then, as we move away from the new release or the new function level, the attention on the new features kind of, goes off. And so, I think it's, and like most people, I think, when the new release first comes out, you're not ready at that point. And so, you might have gone to a WebEx on the new features and functions and, and thought that was cool. But by the time you actually implement it, you may have forgot it. So anyway, so, my presentation today is to go back and look at some of the important features that were added in 12, as well as cover, the new features that were covered, added in version 13.
Bob,
And then,
just sorry to interrupt. Would
mm,
you like to just maximize the main sort of foils screen? Because at the moment we can see all the foils and sort of the notes and everything.
you can
Is
see
it
everything.
possible to, yeah, is it possible just to maximize the foils really?
Yeah, let me,
That screen you're on there, yeah, that's the one.
yeah, stop sharing for a second.
I think depending what screens you're on, it could be quite small otherwise if it's just tucked in the corner sort of thing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. No, yeah. Could you just see just the one slide now?
No, still seeing
Oh,
all of them myself.
sorry.
That's it. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. Yeah. All right, and then after we talk about the new features, then we'll go into the redirected recovery. That was a feature that was actually added in version 12, but yeah, it was added to the IBM recovery utility itself in version 12. And then we'll stop and take any questions and answers. So, there's two views of currency. So there's the, let me see, I'm sorry, let me just stop the video here. Okay. So there's usually two views of currency. Most people think of it in terms of their DB2 code level they're running. So, as an example, if the most current version of DB2 is version 13, function level 502, and you are at version 13.502, well, then you could say, yes, you're current. But that's true only in terms of the code level. So the second way to look at this is, how current you are as far as the features and functions you've started to deploy. So, as you implement more and more of these new features of DB2, you're becoming more current. So, and another way to look at this too is, if you took a DBA from 2010 and, jump forward in time from 2010 to, today and had them look at your system, would they see anything they didn't recognize? If they, didn't see anything they didn't recognize, well, then you're pretty much guaranteed as far as feature function level, you're not current. So, the first feature we'll talk about today is universal range partition table spaces. So with traditional universal range partition table spaces, known as PBR table spaces, so there's been a lot of limitations here and concern from DBAs, one of those being capacity. So as an example, a DBA may be concerned that they can only get 16 terabytes of data into a table. And they might have thought, well, I thought I could get 128 terabytes of data. Well, it's you can if you're using 32K pages. But if you're using 4K pages, well, then you're only going to get a capacity of, let's say, 16 terabytes. So, you might think, well, that's a lot, but we have tables out there that, are multiplying with tens of billions of rows of data. So, so the DBAs are starting to worry about capacity. So, and another limitation of these PBR table spaces is the connection between the maximum number of partitions and the maximum size of a partition. So, DBAs don't like the fact that as you increase or maximize the size of the partition, you decrease the number of partitions you have. So for example, if you want the maximum size of the partition to be 256 gigabytes and you want to use 4K pages, can you have 4,096 partitions? Well, no, you can only get 64 partitions. So, why do these limitations exist? Basically because of the way, page numbering is done. Traditional universal table spaces, how they work is every page has a unique page number. And this is referred to as, absolute page numbering. So with DB212, we introduced a new type of PBR table space that uses what's called relative page numbering. So with that, how that works is with every page, or every partition, I'm sorry, with every partition, the page number start, again at 1. So you have partition 1, 1 through, let's say 1,000, and then partition 2, 1 through 1,000. So it's the partition number and the page number itself that make it unique instead of just the page number. So now, exactly what does this mean in terms of enhancement? Well, the RPN table space will provide you all kinds of new capabilities. It can have up to 4,096 partitions, even with the DSIs being as large as it can be. And then for an RPN table space, the maximum size can be n gigabytes, where that n number is between 1 and 1,024. So if, as an example, if you want the DSIs for a particular partition to be 173 gigabytes, as I show here, that's fine. With the traditional PBR, that n number had to be a power of 2, but that's no longer the case with RPN. And then with RPN, you could have 4,096 partitions. Each one can hold up to 1,024 gigabytes. So, meaning you could get actual, 4,096 terabytes of data in one table, regardless of the page size. And there's other benefits. In an RPN table space, different partitions can have different DS sizes. And so when, the DS size value is increased for one particular partition, another nice thing is that's an immediate change. There's no need for a reorg to realize that change. So, and then what if you have 1,000 partition table and the DS size is 8 gigabytes? And let's say, one of the partitions, partition 237 hits that 8 gig limit. What you can do is you could just alter that partition and specify the new DS size. And, again, that change is immediate. And then you might think, all right, well, this is great. I have all these traditional PBR table spaces. What can I do to make them RPN? Well, there is a way to alter a PBR table space, and all you have to do is specify the page number relative keyword. And then after you alter the table, adding that page number relative, then you have to actually reorg it to materialize that change. Another nice feature added in version 12 was the insert partition. So with this new feature, it gives you the ability to insert a partition into the middle of a range of a partition table space. So, starting with DB2 version 8, there was always a way to add a partition, but it was always at the end, but what if that is not the best place to put it? So, if you look for this example here, if you have a table that has 500 partitions, with all the partition being relatively same size, that's good. That's what you want. But let's say now that one of them grows, partition to 239 here, which is now twice the size of the other partitions. This is not ideal. You want, again, because you want them to be, the same size. So as a DBA, what you would most likely do is what you would like to do is put a partition right in front of that partition 239, and then specify for that partition a limit key value. So then with that change, what will happen, about half of the rows in partition 239 will be placed into this new partition. So, which then, when you do that, then you're evening out the size of each of the partitions. So this became available in function level 500. So you could see in this example here, this shows how the insert partition works. So in this example, we have 3 partitions. You could see L is logical and P is physical. And so in this example, partition 2 is bigger than the other 2 partitions. And what you want to do is, even that out. So with function level 500 activated, the DBA can now issue the statement you see here, with the alter table add partition ending at with a limit key value of 30. So you can now specify that new limit key value that will put the partition in the middle of that table. What you see here, what I've pointed out in yellow, that part is optional, meaning it is not required. If you specify the part of the statement in green, then DB2 will know what to do. So the part in yellow is more of a DBA eye check, just to alert the DBA to exactly what they're doing in case they forget. So the DDL statement, once it's executed, it'll require an online reorg before the change gets materialized. And then once that happens, as you can see here, you'll have the 4 logical partitions, and then partition 2 will be in the middle there instead of at the end. The next new feature is SQL procedure language. It's not a new feature of DB2, but there's been some enhancements added that are pretty neat. So those not familiar, the SQLPL is it's another modern feature of DB2. What this will allow you to do is it allows you to write a DB2 processing routine or program using only SQL. So you might be wondering, well, how can you do that with just SQL statements? This is possible because there's a category of SQL statements called control statements, such as if, iterate, loop, while, and go to. So while using SQL procedure language, you could write a program using only those SQL statements, which can become very sophisticated logic. So then starting with DB2 version 9, what you could do is you could write a stored procedure in SQLPL itself and refer to them as native SQL procedures. Then, and in version 10, we gained the ability to write a user-defined functions known as UDFs. UDFs, we call these compiled SQL scalar functions. And then in DB212, they introduced triggers, which can called advanced triggers. So in the body of an advanced trigger, you can have an SQLPL routine. So if you're wondering, so what's so great about SQLPL? Well, there's several things. One, when an SQLPL routine is invoked through the DB2 distributed data facility, which is DDF, that is invoked by a DRDA requester program by way, for example, through DB2 Connect or a REST client. The execution and SQLPL routine will be up to 60% ZIF offloadable. So, that gives you a cost of computing advantage. Another benefit is, if you have both environments, DB2 for ZOS and DB2 for LUW. And so when you're running both of those in your environment, they're pretty much the same. So you can write routines for both of those environments. There's also functional advantages. So for example, a native SQL procedure, and only a native SQL procedure could be created as an autonomous procedure. So what this does is the data changes made by an autonomous procedure will not be rolled back. So this way, if you want to have some type of audit trail that some type of transaction happened, what you do is, so you write a program, the transaction happens, you call the autonomous procedure, and then you come back and you do some other things, and then the transaction fails. Well, because you have that autonomous procedure there, you could put like a row in a table to to specify that that transaction actually did happen. And then further, a native SQL procedure or a UDF can accept as input, a DB2 array. A lot of Java and .NET programmers, like to send in an array instead of individual values, and you could do that. Also, the SQLPL routine runs under the task of the caller. So that could give you, that's good news, because you're not talking, when you're talking nested procedures, when one calls another, you're not adding more tasks. The next feature we'll talk about is transfer ownership. So this new statement was introduced again in DB212. So, and this is the problem it addresses. So suppose we have a situation with a user ID of, let's say, Fred, who owns 500 tables. Then Fred gets a new role. And in that role, Fred shouldn't own those, or shouldn't have access to those tables. With Fred being the owner, he has some implicit privileges, obviously. He with those tables, since he created them. And one of those privileges, obviously, being able to access the data. So it doesn't matter, if Fred hasn't been granted that authority, he has that implicit privilege. So we could fix this by, changing the owner, of course, but, before this new enhancement, that meant you'd have to unload the data, drop the table, recreate the table and all the dependent objects, and then load the data back. So, this might be fine if you're talking for, about a few tables, but what if you're talking like 500? So in DB212, they gave you the ability to solve that problem by way of this new SQL statement. The transfer ownership statement. So this statement, it can be executed to change the owner of all the database objects that have been owned by Fred to, let's say, Sally. Just doesn't just affect, again, the object such as the table. It also affects, the table space, the view, the databases, the alias, still groups, all the dependent objects. Another nice feature, or another nice thing about the transfer of ownership, it doesn't invalidate the packages. So, so let's take, for example, that Fred and Fred owns the Fred.orders table, and now Sally owns it. The fully qualified name of that does not change, so it still remains Fred.orders. So again, you don't have to, change the schema name. So then if you're wondering, who exactly can execute this ownership change? Well, taking this example into consideration, obviously Fred could do it because he's the owner, so he could transfer it. The only other user that can do this is somebody with SecAdmin authority. And that is true even with separate security set to no. So you might think in that situation that sysadmin has implicit SecAdmin authority. It does. except when it comes to the transfer ownership. So you might want to take a look at, who you gave SecAdmin authority to, if you're going to consider using this new feature. Next, DB2 generated statistic profiles. So now let's suppose you have a query that is running very long. What can you do about it? Well, one possibility is to rewrite the query. Another is to add an index or maybe modify an existing index. But according to the team at the IBM Support Center that works on performance problems related to long running queries, they said for years they've been saying 75% or more of those problems are ultimately solved by not rewriting the query or adding an index or modifying the index. It's solved by actually getting the right statistics into the DB2 table. But, how do you know what the statistics that the DB2 optimizer needs to generate a good access plan for the DB2 query? Well, with DB2 12, function level 500, the optimizer will now tell you what it needs. So when that happens, and that happens when you have the zparm, stat feedback underscore profile set to yes, which is by the way the default. So in function level 500 of 12 or higher, when the access plan is generated for a query or a static or dynamic, what the optimizer will do, it'll find the statistics that would be helpful in optimizing that given query. So and then what it'll do is it'll insert a row into the IBM systables underscore profiles. And if you run a run stats utility for that particular table, and you do not specify any statistics gathering options and just specify use profile, then what runstats will do is it'll pull that profile out of the table, the systables underscore profiles table, and it'll generate the statistics that the optimizer is looking for. So, some shops may say, well, I do a lot of statistics gathering and it's done via inline stats. Well, how could I do this? Well, you couldn't prior to DB212, but now with DB212 you can. So even if you're using inline stats, you can specify the use profile. And here's a real world example of how this really helped out a customer. This customer was at DB212 function level 500. They ran a query that ran for over 23 hours. And then, they finally canceled it. And then the DBA just happened to notice that in the catalog table, systables underscore profile, there was a row there for that table being accessed. So they thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't put that there. So they ran a run stats with the use profile on that table. It invalidated the statement cache to get that poor performing query out of there. And then when he resubmitted the query, it completed in only 5 minutes. So, all this because again, it had the right stats. So again, this can be a pretty powerful feature.
Bob,
Yes.
there's a question just popped up, and it goes along this line. What things to keep in mind while working on transfer ownership to avoid any uncertain problem with access in DB2? So I guess it's concern about access to the table then being lost after the transfer of ownership.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't affect any of the grants, you know what I mean? So if you've been granted access to that table, you're not going to lose it. The only thing that's going to change, in my example, instead of Fred owning those tables, Fred will lose all authority to those tables. And now, the new owner will become Sally. So you could think of it as, it just moved Fred to Sally, but nothing they'll change. It's like I said, it doesn't invalidate the packages. It doesn't affect any, users that have been granted access to that. So does that help? Okay.
I think so for me, Bob.
Okay.
Just looking for a thumbs up. I'll let you know if there's any other questions. Carry on.
All right, thank you. Next, time temporal support. So, this was introduced in DB210, but and we don't really see this being used a lot, but given the possibilities for applications, it could be good. So this is how row versioning works. So for a table that a DBA enables for row versioning, the table will have an associated history table. And then when a row in the base table is updated or deleted, the before image of that row will be put into the history table. So the base and history table will contain timestamp columns, and these help you determine, these are therefore to tell you when they became current and when they stopped becoming current. So for example, when a row is inserted or updated, it'll show when the row stopped being current because it was updated or deleted. What this means with this type of functionality in place, you can submit a query with a temporal predicate. So this way you can retrieve data that was current as of a prior point in time, even if that data is no longer current. So if you want to see the data for a particular count at a particular date, you can do that. And then you can see here this is an example of the query with a temporal predicate. What's in white here is an example of the predicate. So as you see, you're selecting info from bank account where account ID equal 56789. But we also have the temporal predicate, which states, for system time as of May 12th with the indicated timestamp. So the result you see is that information for that account as of that date and timestamp. So this information will, come from the history table because that is where the information is held. But you notice you don't have to specify the name of the history table. The only thing you need to do is reference the base table. And function level 504 and deprecated objects, I
Hi,
wanted to cover.
Bob, just sorry to interrupt there. Got another question, which is, so if we have more than one poor performing SQL on a table and the optimizer asks for two or more different sets of stats profile, is that possible? And if so, which profile is used?
So if you have one table, it'll put all the stats needed for that one table into one row. I've never seen the case where there's two rows for one table. I guess I'd have to look at that. But like I said, from what I've seen, it creates one row for each table that it needs statistics for, and it puts in all the statistics that are needed just for that one table.
I think I remember in the manual it says there's only ever one row per table, but I could be wrong.
That you remember that as well? Only one row.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like I said, I'd never seen the case of two rows, but yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, good question. Function level 504 and deprecated objects. So again, there's been a lot of confusion around this. Many people think that when they go to DB212 function level 504 activated, from that point forward, they can no longer create a traditional segmented table space. Well, that's not true. What's true is when they can run when they're running a package which has DDL statements and that are issued, for example, through maybe DSN Db2. So when that package is executed with the application compatibility level at 504 or higher, then that package cannot be used to create that type of statement. So likewise, a package at the level cannot be used to create a synonym and other deprecated objects. You also don't have the ability to create, well, some organizations. So why did DB2 do this? Basically, some organizations wanted the ability to make sure or prevent these types of objects from ever being created, even accidentally. So, but what if you were at, version 12, function level 504 and higher, and you need to create these types of objects? What do? Well, you have two options. One is to use a package like Db2 again, or Spoofy, that is bound with Apple Compat function level 503 or lower. But what if you have a program where the package is bound with 504 or higher? Now what do? Well, all you have to do is use the set current application compatibility So an example, set it to version level 12, 504, 5, function level 503. And then once that's issued, you can, issue any of those deprecated statements. Okay, the next feature, rebind phase in. So a package cannot be rebound while in use. So, with this new rebind phase in feature, this helps solve that. So, a package that is bound with release deallocate that is allocated for execution to a persistent thread, meaning a thread with a persistent that will persist through a commit. It can be used for a long period of time. So, for example, a CSS Db2 thread. So the package will be in use for a long time, and which could be a problem if you want to rebind that package. So even if a package is bound with release commit, if executed frequently enough, the use count of that package might never go to zero, making it tough to do a rebind. So the rebind can then request the so if the request for a rebind comes in, obviously it's going to either be held up or which can be disruptive to your environment. So what the rebind phase in feature helps resolve, what it's used for is to automatically so this feature is used automatically, and it doesn't require any syntax changes with the rebind package command. So if you're at function level 505 or higher and you rebind a package and Db2 sees that that package is used, it'll automatically use this rebind phase in feature. So how does this new feature work? Well, so this is built on top of an existing functionality, which is called plan management. Plan management is, again, it's on by default, and there's a ZParm called plan management, and its default setting is set to extended. So when the case, and with this case, what we do is we keep up to 3 instances of any given package, which we refer to them as copies. So and they're distinguished by the numbers, with copy 0 being the most recent, copy 1 being the previous, and copy 2 being the original. So obviously when you first bind a package, you're going to have the current one. Then if you rebind it again, you'll have the current plus the previous. And then if you rebind it a third time, you'll have the current, previous, and original. So now with function level 505 and this rebind phase in for a package, and Db2, if it sees the current copy is 0 is in use, then Db2 will respond to that package in use by using the rebind phase in, which will non-disruptively generate a new instance of that package. It'll give the new instance a copy identifier, and it'll start with 4. That's because copy 3 is reserved for IBM future use. So later down the road, the copy 4 is bound and then in use, and then a new copy will come in, and then the next copy will be copy 5. So this will go on up until copy 16. And then once it hits 16, it'll wrap back around to 0. So you can see here, here's the example of how this works. So let's say we need to rebind a package and the current copy is 0. We then issue the rebind. So there are 2 threads now, threads 1 and 2 currently using the package we want to rebind. So what will Db2 do is it'll generate a new copy, and then it'll call that copy 4. And then let's say, while that rebind is running, here comes thread 3 who wants to execute the package. Will this hold up to the execution? Well, no, it'll just use copy 0. So the first request for the package after the rebind is completed, that is the green thread number 4. It'll pick up in the use copy 4. So, eventually threads 1, 2, and 3 will finish, and then we can put the copy identifier 0 back in the pool, and then it can be used to distinguish one copy from the other. The next feature, create or replace support for stored procedures. So this was a new capability which gives users to specify create or replace. So this means you do not have to first drop a procedure. You could, if you want to modify it, you just simply use the create or replace procedure, and if it already exists, the procedure will be replaced. Next, the alter table space with move. So this was this feature provides support for moving tables from the deprecated multi-table, simple or segmented table space to the partition by growth or PBG. The new alter table space with move option. By doing this move, you'll be able to take advantage of the the features that are only available to universal table spaces. And an online reorg to apply the pending changes is required. Deletion of old statistics. So when you specify the use profile, as we talked about before, option one with run stats, DB2 will collect only those statistics that are in that profile. So once function level 507 is activated, what will happen, DB2 will delete any existing statistics for those stats not being collected. So this means that, all frequency, key cardinality, histogram statistics that are not included in the profile are deleted from the DB2 catalog. So this provides a way for you to remove those stale distribution statistics without, impacting concurrently running Dynamics SQL. High availability accelerator only table. So you can now define an accelerator only table in more than one accelerator. So what this capability does is enhances the accelerator only table with high availability and workload balancing, including the following. It can reroute a query to an available accelerator if the target accelerator is not available. And it can use the accelerator workload balancing algorithm to distribute those queries based on the queue length on each accelerator. Next, object level Huffman compression. So with function level 509, this was introduced. So it gives you the capability to explicitly specify either the fixed length or Huffman compression algorithm at the table space, or partition level. You could do this with the create table space, and alter table space statements. So the DB2 catalog is then updated to indicate the type of compression algorithm used for that object. Next, tamper-proof audit profiles. So this was introduced in function level 509. This can't be modified or stopped unless the user is authorized to access the audit profile. So as an example, in ZOS, if you're using RACF, that added security is added with RACF. So a ZOS system administrator must perform a special task in the external security product like RACF to permit the DB2 user to access, to update or delete or stop a tamper-proof audit profile. So this new audit capability prevents users from, with advanced DB2 privileges, from unnecessarily modifying or stopping that audit profile policy, so minimizing the loss of that audit information. Okay, next, now we're on to DB213. So with DB213, one of the exciting features added was the utility history. So the utility history, it introduced a new catalog table. This is IBM, that's just utilities. And what this will do, it'll contain the real-time and historical information for utility execution. So how this works is a row is inserted for each IBM DB2 utility execution, and it'll contain information such as the event ID, which uniquely identifies that utility execution, job name, utility name, starting and ending time, elapsed time, CPU time. So it gives you all that type of historical information you can look back on. So again, so what's nice is the table can be used to check on your daily executions and take corrective actions if needed. It could be used to compare utility executions. So maybe you had a utility that ran today that ran 2 hours, but last week it ran an hour. So you want to compare the two, you could do that. So, how this works is at function level 500 after cat main, the catalog table is created, and then at function level 501, you can activate this feature. You can turn it on in the Db2 utilities parameter panel under utility history. You just have to change the default from none to utility there. SQL data insights. This was another new feature 13. So this is a feature of Db2. It comes with no extra charge. It does require a separate install. There's a web piece or component that you have to install. So, and this is just one example of how Db2 and the new Z16 will work together. So what it'll allow you to do is access deep learning algorithms using SQL queries. It'll use data models that are already designed, and it uses natural language processing to expose the Db2 data by discovering systematic relationships. So what this will do is provide users the ability to infuse AI directly into their database to discover hidden data and patterns. So again, there's a web UI piece. You log on to the web UI piece, you create a connection to the Db2, you select your tables you want to work with, and then you can select the columns of those tables you want to compare against each other. And then it runs its deep learning algorithms, or and then after that is done, then you can run your queries. So this is done by, it created 3 new functions within Db2. So you could see here, the AI similarity, it'll identify the similarities and dissimilarities and computes a similarity score then. The semantic clustering, it'll identify the incorrect or missing entries. So it'll compute a semantic clustering score again of a member of arguments that it's comparing. AI analogy, it'll identify relationships between the attributes and again, compute that score. So some examples of how this can be used. One is financing, like in banking or investment. So you want to find customers that have similar transactions. As an example, you maybe had one customer that just filed bankruptcy. Do you have other customers with the similar traits of this customer that just filed bankruptcy? So you could find that ahead of time. Fraud detection. So money laundering or identity theft. So again, if you want to find some similar accounts, you could do that. With the insurance industry, you can help identify customers that have similar and dissimilar claims, or you could use it as a risk profiling. So you want to analyze patients that have the same symptoms or diagnosis to see if this patient could end up with the same diagnosis. Next, and Db213 was the PBG to PBR conversion. So so as everybody knows, the future direction of Db2 is UTS table spaces. And so in function 508, they provided the necessary conversion there for table spaces to go to UTS that we just talked about with the move table space. So PBGs might be good for small to mid-sized tables, but PBRs are better with larger tables with millions and millions of rows. So prior to Db213, there was really no way to go from a PBG to a PBR. To do this, what you had to do is unload the data, drop the table space into dependent objects, recreate those objects, and then load the data back in. So now what you could do is through a DDL alter statement, you can now convert that PBR or PBG to PBR. And then what you have to do is you have to run a reorg to materialize those changes. As you can see here, this is an example of the alter statement that you would run to convert PBG to a PBR. And this was a new feature added to function level 502. So what this does now is it'll invalidate individual statements within a package. So instead of invalidating the entire package, it can now, depending if you do it, how you bind this. So if DP level statement, what it'll do is it'll validate individual statements instead of the whole package. And then redirected recovery. So again, this was, a feature that was added to the IBM recovery utility itself. This was added in version 12. So this gives the users the ability to test and validate the recovery procedures and performance without impacting, the availability of production or system applications. So, many customers are not only interested in the recovery point objective, but they're also interested in the recovery time objective, especially your management. They're, they might come to you and say, are we going to meet our recovery time objective? So, and for those that know, an RTO determines how long it will take to recover your data back to the point prior to the error or outage. So, as part of GDPR, some customers are using the redirected recovery to determine their RTO, as customers that might have, be able to done this before this new feature. So, what you do with the redirected recovery is you're basically recovering an object or a set of objects to a set of target tables. So some use cases here, again, like I talked about, it'll help you to determine, recovery time objective. Again, if you have a particular application that maybe consists of, maybe 15 databases, what you could do, run a redirected recovery. And again, how this works is the target tables have to exist. So you have to create the target tables and the target objects, and they have to match exactly the source objects. So you run your redirected recovery. Again, it's not affecting your production objects, and it's recovering the data to these target objects, again, which are not affecting your production data. So it does require this ZOS, this PTF to be in order for this to get this feature. So there are some limitations. It supports only universal table spaces. So if you have, still have this simple or segmented table spaces, it will not work on that. Again, the target objects have to exist, and they have to be on the same DB2. And then options that aren't available for redirected recovery, as you can see here, some of the options are it's the scope, to back out, the clone page. So those options you're not allowed to do a redirected recovery with those options. And you can see here, this is the syntax of this new recover table space statement. So again, you're recovering, from your source to your target. And with that, I am complete. So as you can see there's my QR code. So please remember to, fill out your feedback. I'd like to know, what you thought was good, what you thought was, needed work. Any comments are welcome.
I think there's a question just popped up in the last couple of minutes, Bob.
Okay.
Can you see that? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. John is saying PBR has last partition as max value. Is there an easy way to get PBR and PBG?
Yeah,
so I think it kind of wants both. So for example, storing data by date using year, month for each partition. So you only keep 3 years of data and have a rolling GDG like table space.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. I see what he's saying now.
So he wants to store it based on date, like have a partition for each particular date. But yeah, so is he say, are you saying, well, is he saying he wants to start with a PBG and then convert to a PBR, and he has that type of table space?
I think he wants the best of both worlds. A new hybrid table space.
Yeah, that sounds like an aha idea. So, yeah, I guess I'm a little fuzzy in that question. Feel free to reach out to with me, to me, and I could help you get that answered.
And there's one more question from Duran. Can the indexes also be used for redirected recovery?
Yes,
So can you recover an index that's got an index copy with
yes, you can.
redirected?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I forgot to. I keep on saying I got to update my deck. There is another PTF for indexes. So yes, redirected recovery will work for both, table spaces and index spaces. Good question.
Thanks, everyone. I think that's the last question, Bob. So I think as we're nearly at lunch, I'll wrap up there, I think. So thanks very much, Bob. That's a great session. I've listed
Okay.
all those different things that we've had. I'm just curious to know how many customers have actually thought of or actually using a lot of those. I mean, some of those are automatic, aren't they? But some of them aren't. So yeah, it's fascinating to go through those and see all the different things that have changed. Thanks very much,
exactly. No problem.
Right. Okay. So after lunch, when we come back at 2 o'clock on the DB2 stream, we have a session on, I'll find it, which I can't. There it is. Great. On the DB2 stream, we have a DB2 Vazos 101 session on buffer pools and group buffer pools with Tori Felt from Washington IBM Center. So back at 2, enjoy lunch, and we'll see you then. And please do the feedback. You can see the link on the last foil. And this is session 2.0, not 2.0. Thanks very much.
Okay.